Okay, great.
Hey everybody, Team Wilpers. This is not Athlete Spotlight. This is our my Industry Pro segment, and I'm here with Marjorie Gabriel. So, Marjorie, thanks
Hey,
for joining
team.
me again. What
Happy to be
fun!
back.
Thanks. So, we're going to talk about nutrition, but I want. Would you mind telling us why we're talking to you, or why you're talking to me? What do you do? What's your story?
Sure. So my background is in fitness training and in sports nutrition. So synergistically, it's kind of the perfect pairing. I started out as a personal trainer many, many years ago. We're talking like multiple decades. And my clients kept asking me for nutrition advice. So I ended up getting my graduate degree in sports nutrition and food science. And then from there, it sort of kept on going because then people wanted to know, well, how do I make these foods you're telling me to eat? So I became a chef. And so I don't do personal training anymore, but I still do the nutrition consulting and the menu development and the food prep and all of those things. And I'm actually currently consulting mostly full time for a company that does customized meal prep for pro athletes. So I do spend a lot of my time focused on figuring out which supplements, which ingredients, this guy has this injury. We need to add this to his meal. So that's a lot of what I do on a daily basis. Yeah.
That's amazing. I wish you lived near me, or actually, even more importantly, I wish you could go on my trip coming up.
Well, I wish I could too. Believe me.
We had a chef hired who backed out, and you would have been perfect, but it was so last minute. So we're going to restaurants instead. But I just want to hit on that. So we're going to be doing some long rides, and I think even some folks in this community are looking at Pelofondos and even
hmm
2 hour rides, Peloton community. What, and I just did a whole segment on fueling. We've been talking about fueling recently. What are we looking at in the form of a recovery meal? So post long or hard bout of exercise, what is the recovery meal and why?
Okay. Well, first of all, it needs to be within 45 minutes to an hour
Sweet.
because your metabolism is revved and your body is still using up the nutrients. And if you're not replenishing what you have burned through, you're going to start burning through lean tissue. So the very first thing you want to do is make sure that you are getting that meal in. Now, there are a lot of different protein guidelines depending on age, gender, type of exercise you're doing, length of workout, but all told, you really should be getting a good combination of carbs, fat, and protein. And I think there are two things to consider here. Number one, a lot of athletes who try to stay lean, they're afraid of carbs. And it's really important that we are adding back in all of those glycogen stores that you depleted when you're doing that Pelofondo, when you're riding for however many hours, when you run your marathon, those kinds of things. So I do want to make sure that people are getting carbs. Now, when you're fueling during a ride, you've talked about that before. Simple carbs are great because they're, easy to digest and less likely for your body to have issues with in terms of your stomach and whatnot. And they're more readily available. But post workout, you actually really want to focus on the complex carbs. So you want to go for your starchy vegetables like your sweet potatoes and your whole grain rice and your parsnips and your beets and all that good stuff. So root vegetables and whole grains are usually my recommendation. If it's morning and you want something that's a little more breakfasty, you can do a sweet or savory oatmeal. But you also do need to make sure that you're replenishing your protein and your fat stores. So you should be getting a minimum of 20% of your calories from fat as well. And I think that that's another sort of holdover from diet culture, even from back in the 80s where everything was fat free. And right now, I think we see
Yeah.
extremes. I think we either see, I don't want any fat, or people are going keto and they're eating all fat. And for me, it's always been about teaching people balance. I don't believe in highly restrictive diets. We just talked about this in our last conversation. That's a slippery
Yeah.
slope for people and it can
Yeah.
lead to disordered eating patterns. So I really
Yeah,
encourage people
totally.
after Pelofondo, get a lot of complex carbs in, get a solid amount of protein because you don't want those muscle fibers to be breaking down. And then make sure that you're adding in a little bit of fat because I think people tend not to realize that fat's essential for our hormones. And you can throw your hormones out of whack, especially your cortisol levels and your adrenal function when you're pushing your body really hard with exercise. So you need to make sure that you're getting enough fat so that your body can then continue to make these hormones that are essential for us to function properly.
That's awesome. So
So
post workout, within 45 minutes, we want really a meal of
you want a meal
carbohydrates, fats, and proteins.
and proteins.
20%
Yep.
fat, is there 20% fat? Is there a percentage of carbohydrate and protein?
I mean, I
for
think
that meal specifically?
for that meal specifically, I would go a little bit heavier on the carbs. So I would probably say
4-to-1,
50,
three-to-one.
50 to 55% carbs and then the rest protein. Yeah. Just because you really do want to make sure that you're, replenishing all of that glycogen that you lost, that you burned through while you were working out.
Yeah,
The
right.
protein is
Okay.
there. The protein is there, when you're talking about endurance training and you're talking about a long ride as opposed to a strength workout, the protein is there more to just prevent muscle loss as opposed to using it for hypertrophy or muscle growth. So you don't need quite as much protein, but you do
Yeah.
need some because we
You
want it to be
do need some.
balanced. So
So it
yeah,
sounds like 55 to 60% carbs. Is that what you said?
I would say about 55. I feel like if I say 60, people are
55.
going to freak out, but yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
afraid of 60. I'm not
I
afraid
would
of
say like
60, but
I would say like 55 carbs, 20% protein, and 20% fat and like 25% protein. So yeah,
yeah, okay,
yeah.
cool. So it could be like one to two, or I mean, at an extreme, 1 to 3 grams of protein to grams of carbohydrates. So somewhere in that
Pretty
range
much, yes. And just for
for
the
the
people who for the recovery, yeah. And just for
for
people
the
who don't
recovery meal.
know, yes, only the recovery meal. And for people who don't
Okay,
know, when we're talking about one to one, obviously you know this, so it's easy for you to say the one to one. A gram of protein and a gram of carbohydrates has the same number of calories. They're both 4 calories.
yes, yes,
So fat has 9 calories. So that's why sometimes when you're talking about percentages, it's not really a 1 to 1 ratio if you're comparing like fat to protein or fat to carb in terms of
right,
calories. But at the end of the
right.
day, we still just talk about percentages. So yeah.
And the percentages are in grams, are of the grams. Yes.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we usually,
Just making
yeah.
sure it's
So,
clear.
yeah.
So that's for the recovery, but what about an
Yes.
overall balance or an overall, can you give us the what, when, and why of carbs, fat, and protein, or of an overall diet? If you know my story a little bit, and you probably know the general story of most of the listeners,
All
can you
right.
give some general guidelines?
So, I usually hate to default to some sort of like program that's out there, but for a really long time, people were really big into the zone. Um, and that's like 40, 30, 30. And,
Okay.
but my belief is that the 40 can be adjusted. So it can be 40% carbs or 40% protein, depending on your needs,
Ah,
and then
okay.
30% fat.
Yeah.
So I sort of start with that and then say you can stretch it. If you're doing a lot of endurance exercise and you're burning through a lot of carbs, you actually probably should be getting about 50% of your calories from carbs every day. Assuming you're riding every day, you're training hard every day, that kind of thing. If you're doing more weight training and you're trying to grow and build muscle and things like that, then you actually want to increase your protein. And, again, here we go with once upon a time, they used to say, oh, you need to eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And that's not correct. It's actually like 1 to 1.5 grams per kilogram. So it's about half the quantity that people used to think you needed. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
1.6, I think, is the number that we say 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight for
Per
hypertrophy. So for
kilogram.
muscle growth.
Right.
Yes.
Right,
So
per
you divide
kilogram.
your
So it's
body
really
weight.
not that. It's probably not as
Right.
much as the bodybuilders think, and for
Exactly.
some people, it's actually more. For people who are not used to eating a little protein at every meal, but it's worth measuring out. Do you think
It is. I think it's
once
worth measuring.
once in a
I
while?
think, yes, I think you start measuring so that you gain an understanding and a grasp of what these portions should look like. And then I think you toss the measuring cups and the scales just because, again, it can get a little obsessive. People can focus a little too much on that. And at the end of the day, we really still want people to enjoy eating and not look at it as, a science experiment or start freaking out that they're a gram over something. So I tell people, get a good feel for it. And then once you can eyeball it and trust yourself. And you'll feel it in your body. If you're starting to sort of veer a little too far off to one end, you'll notice a change in your performance, in the way you're feeling, in your body composition. And then you can always go back and you can sort of teach yourself again and say, all right, let me make sure I'm dialing these quantities in and, start over a little bit. So there's always a
Oh,
chance for a reset.
sounds awesome. So I don't have to feel guilty about not measuring on a long-term basis. I can measure
No,
once or
no,
twice
it's,
a week,
I
and
find
then
it, look,
yeah,
if you were a a figure competitor and you needed to have like such specific macros dialed in so that you were in prime shape for a show where you were on stage flexing your muscles, yes, you would be weighing and measuring everything. If you're just trying to fuel your body for a healthy life and to be able to accomplish your workouts and feel like you are fit and able to, hammer on the days you need to hammer, you should not be worrying about weighing and measuring everything. Once you sort of have a good understanding of what a portion size looks like. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so there's so much more. I remember my nutrition classes in college way back when. I think they started with carbohydrate, fat, and protein, but then they went on to other nutrients and vitamins and minerals. And that kind of
Right.
ties into what I was talking about last night and this week with the group is the immune system. And
Mm-hmm.
how can we boost our immune system overall in general? And what if we're fighting a cold or
Right.
some other
Well,
disease right now?
I have a lot of thoughts on this, and there are some things that I just want to touch on really quickly with recovery because I think, yes, we talked about nutrition in terms of your actual meal for recovery, but there are also specific ingredients and specific nutrients besides the macronutrients that you can look for if you're concerned about recovery. So yes, we're talking about carbs because you want to restore your glycogen. We're talking about protein because you want to make sure that you're maintaining your muscle or repairing the muscle if you've sustained any micro tears with any, heavy efforts. You want to make sure you've got those fats, but fats are also important as an energy source, but they're really important for recovery. And I want to make sure that athletes understand that yes, we want to be lean, but you can still be lean and eat fat. Your body actually really needs it to function properly. So, the other thing to think about, iron is really good for recovery because it
Oh, good
allows us to
call.
shuttle more of that oxygen to the blood cells. And so you're
Yeah.
improving your VO2 max and you're, getting better oxygen uptake, and better oxygen to your cells means everything's going to recover more quickly. There's a big thing about, creatine monohydrate. A lot of athletes take creatine as a supplement, but there's a reason why it's so popular because it's actually very good for you because it helps your muscle cells produce more energy while you're working out. And it also helps your cells recover more quickly. So if people are asking me, do I want to have some supplements after a workout? I'll say, yeah, you want some creatine, maybe you want some magnesium because that will also help with the, electrical impulses in your muscles and with your, hydration. We want your potassium, and you want your antioxidants as well, because when we're putting a lot of stress on the body in any form, you're going to get oxidative stress and free radical damage. So you want to
Yeah.
make sure that you're getting those antioxidants so that you can repair and protect the cells. So I would always jokingly tell my clients to eat the rainbow, and I don't mean a bag of Skittles, but it's true. It's true that, you really do want to be eating foods of every color because that's the way you're going to get the full spectrum of the nutrients and the antioxidants, and these micronutrients that we need to make sure that we're recovering and repairing properly. And the one thing that is not food related that I think we all need to remember is your best recovery tool is sleep.
Yeah.
And I think
Oh, totally.
as a
Totally.
rule, we
Yeah.
don't get enough sleep. Everybody's so focused on trying to cram everything in and, I got to get up at 3 a.m. so that I can ride for 3 hours. You have to find a way to balance your life so that you can get the sleep, because if you're not giving your body enough time to actually repair and absorb all that nutrition you're giving it, you're not really doing yourself much benefit. So, yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Oh,
Now we can
totally
talk about
agree.
immune support. Sorry, I
Immune
just felt
support.
like I needed to get that in there. Yeah,
Back up to the protein though. One time.
sure.
If you're having a protein supplement, do most of them have creatine in it?
You have to read a label. I mean, the reality
Okay.
is no, they mostly don't because creatine is considered a supplement, and a lot of these proteins are really just pure protein with some vitamins and minerals added, and creatine is not considered a vitamin or a mineral. So you would usually have to get a separate creatine monohydrate powder.
Okay.
So, yeah, but, and when protein powders are concerned, I always also tell people, like, look for something that's really clean. I don't want to see a lot of sugar in there. I don't want to see any junky artificial sweeteners like sucralose and aspartame and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
it shouldn't have anything in it but protein. And then you also have to look into, how is my body responding to this type of protein? Some people do really well with whey protein. Some people have bad reactions to it because it's dairy. Some people do better on, plant-based proteins. I personally only use plant-based protein powder just because I find that it's gentler on my system because they use sprouted
Yeah.
legumes and proteins in it, so we don't have to worry about bloating or any of those after effects. So it's one of those things where you sort of have to see what feels better for your body, but the fewer additives in something, the better. So I'd
We have
say
a
get your really clean
plant-based
protein.
protein.
Yeah.
We have a
Yeah.
plant-based protein powder that my wife gets as well too. So With you,
Yeah,
with you.
Sun Warrior is my preferred brand. So,
Cool.
yeah, yeah.
What about the immune system? Is there a specific time of day, a meal, a smoothie? What are we looking at? What's gonna really put me over the top as far as overall immune health?
Okay, so there's no specific time of day, and I love that we're talking about nutrition with this because I don't know that most people in general, not just athletes, know that 70 to 80% of our immune cells reside in our gut. So your immune health is almost completely dependent on how healthy your gut microbiome is. And by microbiome, most of us probably already know that, but just in case, it means like the flora and the natural bacteria that live in your digestive tract. They are responsible for regulating your immune system. So if your diet's out of whack and your gut's out of whack, your immune system is going to be a disaster. And I actually have a lot of friends who've been getting sick a lot this season, and there's been a lot of stuff going around. I mean, obviously we have COVID and there's RSV and there are all these things. And I have these friends who are sick every other week or, every month or two. And they're like, Marge, I haven't been sick since I had COVID 2.5 years ago. I haven't even had a sniffle. They're like, how are we getting sick all the time? I said, because you're eating like crap, to be honest. I said, you really need to dial in your nutrition. And if your gut was actually healthy, you wouldn't be getting sick all the time. The best advice I can give people for making sure that they're maintaining a healthy gut flora. I'm not necessarily a big believer in taking a probiotic supplement unless you really need it, unless you're really out of whack. Your body can adjust on its own if you're giving it the precursors. And there are foods that are called prebiotic foods that your gut will then digest and metabolize and convert into probiotics on their own to sort of adjust the environment in there on their own. So
Yeah.
that's the first step I usually tell people to take. Like instead of taking something in pill form or in liquid form or whatever and spending all that money, start eating some of these probiotic rich food, some of these prebiotic rich foods, which will
I'm ready
then
to write them
help the
down.
gut.
Come on, I can't. The suspense is
All
killing
right, all
me.
right, all right. I'll give you a list. I'm actually going to read from my list so I don't miss anything. I mean, garlic and onions and leeks are actually really big ones, which are in a lot of foods anyway. And you
Awesome.
still get you still get the prebiotic effects when they're cooked, so that's great. So it's not like you have to be eating raw garlic and onions to get the effects. Asparagus is great. Jerusalem artichoke, which is also called sunchoke, and I know a lot of people haven't heard of it, but it's this little knobby vegetable that kind of looks like ginger root, but it
Okay.
sort of tastes like a potato. It's a really cool
Ooh, that
vegetable.
sounds
So I
good,
always
actually.
I turn people
Yeah.
onto it whenever possible. It's a favorite of mine. So Jerusalem
Wait,
artichoke, otherwise known as sunchoke.
Jerusalem
Um,
artichoke. I told you before, I'm
yep.
coming to Park City in March, and I want to have Jerusalem
I'll
artichoke.
make you some. I'll make you some.
Yes.
Bananas actually are prebiotic as well, but usually more when they're less ripe. So if somebody doesn't really like eating a green banana or a mealy banana, you can now buy green banana flour that you can use in
Oh,
baking. So you can bake muffins and breads and things with this green banana flour and get that prebiotic benefit without having to eat like a hard, crunchy green unripe banana. So
right.
that's an
Yeah.
ingredient that I recommend to people. Speaking of baking, you can also use tiger nut flour, which is not technically a nut, so it's good for people who are allergic to like nuts and almond flour and things, and that's very high in prebiotics as well. And it's easy to bake with because it's a pretty easy substitute for almond flour and wheat flour and things. So
I just felt
yeah, there's
bad
a
for the tiger for a second. I don't know what tiger nut flour is. Like,
no,
oh,
yeah. No, I promise. No tigers are harmed in the making of tiger nut flour.
okay. Phew.
It's a special kind of it's called a nut, but it's not really a nut, and they come from Brazil. So, and then
That's awesome.
artichokes, dandelion greens. I mean, there are some specific foods that are very prebiotic rich, and then you've
Yeah, we
got your
have the Natural
probiotic
Foods
foods,
Co-op
and
that has all
yeah,
these things. I'm sure we have like
there
Whole
you go.
Foods and yeah, yeah.
I mean, and I'm
Um,
happy to share recipes with people for these things.
oh my gosh, this is awesome.
Probiotics, which probiotics have been the thing that people have been focusing on more. Prebiotics have sort of just become known. The other thing about prebiotics is that, especially with things like green banana and stuff, they also are a good source of resistant starch, which is really good for regulating blood sugar. I don't know if you've heard about how, potatoes and rice are better for you if they're cooked, cooled, and then reheated. It's because during the cooling
No,
process, they develop resistant starch, which is very beneficial for maintaining blood sugar levels and not spiking your glucose. So
really.
yeah,
Oh,
so that's
that's
just
all
another
right.
benefit.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah. So it's,
Oh my gosh.
reheated potatoes and rice are usually better. So, yeah. So then the
This is
next one
awesome. You have so much good stuff.
I have so much. This is the problem. I have so much, and we have an hour. But,
Yes.
and probiotics are the ones people have already been talking about for years, and that is your fermented food. So it's your sauerkraut, your kimchi, your kefir, your yogurt that actually has probiotic activity in it.
Yeah.
Those are also highly beneficial, and those are the things that I tell people very specifically. If you've been sick and you've been on any sort of medication like antibiotics will wipe out all of the healthy flora in your gut because
Oh,
when they're
good
killing
point.
the baddies, they're also
Yeah.
killing the good stuff. So I
Good
always
point.
tell people when you're taking anything that's going to be killing stuff off in your system, you need to be putting it back. So if you're on antibiotics, make sure you're eating the sauerkraut or the kimchi or the yogurt or whatever it is, and that you're replenishing those probiotics because your gut, while it's being assaulted by the antibiotics, is not going to have time to convert any prebiotics into the pro for you. So
Right. Oh, good
just
point.
get the
Very good
probiotics
point.
directly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's awesome.
So all of these things will help boost your immune system. They will all
Yeah.
keep your gut sort of running properly and your body and your cells running properly. But we do find ourselves in cold and flu season right now. So, what can you do nutritionally to help with that as well? Um, Old school vitamin C, it really
Yeah.
does actually help. I mean,
Can
how
you
many,
overdo it? Can you
you,
overdo it on vitamin C?
You can't really. Vitamin C, fortunately, is one of those things where if you take an excess of it, your body's just going to excrete it in your
Yes.
waste. So
Water
you
soluble.
can't really overdose on vitamin C. Like vitamin A, you can. Vitamin C, you can't.
A, D,
So
E, and K.
A, D, E, and K because they're fat soluble vitamins. And
Do
so
you know how I
yes,
remember it? All dead Eskimos kill.
I do remember that from years ago. I'm impressed. I'm
Those
impressed.
are the fat soluble vitamins. Okay. So vitamin C,
Yeah. So
you just
yeah.
pee it out. You take
Pretty
what you
much.
need
And
and
and I tell
you'll
people
just pee
this
it out. So
a lot of these mega high dose vitamins and supplements, that's what's going to happen. And I've said this to my clients before. I'm like, you're really just paying for expensive pee. Like you don't need to be taking, 20,000 units of something. If I tell you to take 500, take 500. Like
right. Right.
and I get it. These companies are like, oh, well, we're going to make higher doses so that people think more is better. I understand it. It's a marketing thing,
Right.
but the human
Right.
body is only capable of digesting and metabolizing a certain quantity of something at once. So,
Awesome.
but yes, vitamin C, very important. If you don't want to take a supplement, you can be eating your citrus fruits and your broccoli and your strawberries. Your potatoes are surprisingly high in vitamin C.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's one
Peppers.
thing. Yes, peppers, and anything that's yellow, orange, that's really going to give you a good hit of vitamin C. I love strawberries in the summer for that. I try not to eat things like that in the winter too much because they've been shipped from who knows where. And by the time they
Yeah.
get to you, unless they've been frozen, by the time they
Yeah.
get to you, you don't really get much of the nutrient benefits.
Right. Oh,
Zinc
good point.
is really important. Zinc is really
Vitamin
important,
C,
not for just
zinc. Yeah.
not for just maintaining your immune system function, but also it can really help reduce the how long your cold lasts, the duration. So I always, if I ever feel like a hint of a tickle of something, I'll start taking my zinc because it really can help cut back on how long your symptoms are going to last. I do caution people though, when you're taking zinc, you really need to make sure you're not taking more than 50 milligrams a day because it will have this really bizarre side effect where it completely destroys your taste buds. And that can last for a while.
I've heard that. Yeah. I've heard that. Yeah. Be
So,
careful. So all of these things, that's why I asked, can you take too much of it? That's a good question.
yeah,
I think
you can take too much zinc. Yep.
Right.
Vitamin D is super, super important for immune function. And a vast majority of people, particularly women, tend to lean toward being deficient in it. And so I take a vitamin D supplement every single day.
Why are we
In the
deficient?
summertime,
Yeah.
it just has to do with the fact that we don't get it from a lot of foods. So,
Right.
mushrooms and fortified foods are really the only foods that are high in vitamin D.
Yeah.
So the only other way for us to get it is from direct sunlight on our skin so that our skin can then convert it
Yeah.
into the vitamin D that our bodies use. And so if you're not spending a lot of time out in the sun, you're not getting enough vitamin D. So
vitamin D
it's interesting
supplement
because
is a recommendation for
that
a
is a
lot
recommendation.
of people. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. I mean,
Is there
I've
an
been taking
absorption?
it for years.
What's the absorption? Calcium and vitamin C or calcium and vitamin D? Is there a relationship there?
There is. Calcium and vitamin D are synergistic.
Yeah.
So it is helpful to take them together. Yeah.
So calcium helps. So,
Vitamin D actually helps you absorb calcium better.
okay.
So yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
why I think we buy milk with, or even orange juice with vitamin D and calcium
Yes. Yes.
fortified.
Mm-hmm.
I think milk
Yeah.
and or orange juice. But anyway, okay, cool.
Yeah.
You just touched on my next topic. Are we
Okay.
moving on, or are we still on immunity
We can
boost?
we can still stay on immunity. I mean, there's a little more to talk about. I mean, there's a couple of things that people probably don't know about. There's a micronutrient called selenium. It's a
Uh huh.
mineral
Yeah.
that a lot of people probably don't know about, or if they've heard of it, they don't really know what the heck it is. And it's not in a lot of foods, and it's another thing that a lot of people need to be deficient in. And one of the best sources of selenium is Brazil nuts. And those are big nuts. I don't know if you've ever had Brazil nuts, but they're very large. You only really need to eat like one or two a day in order to get enough selenium. But it's one of those things that I feel like, people probably don't get enough of, and it's really good for immune response and reducing inflammation. So if we're
Love it.
talking about athletes who are putting their bodies through a lot of stress, it helps with the inflammatory part of it too.
Yeah,
The
totally.
other couple of things I will touch on really quick are we're going to get a little, so this is becoming more mainstream, but right now people still think some of this stuff is a little unusual. Functional mushrooms, reishi, lion's mane, chaga, cordyceps, more and more we are using these with athletes, and we are even just seeing people, using them every day. There's a couple of companies out there that make mushroom coffee now, and it's
Yeah.
based on these mushrooms.
Awesome.
And those
Yeah.
can really help boost the immune system and help with recovery.
Cool.
So yeah, so that's my only other thing that I tell people. And when we're talking about the height of cold and flu season, one of the stars is elderberry.
Yep.
There's a brand out there called Sambucol that I'm sure you've seen everywhere, and they make cough syrup and
Yeah.
they make lozenges and stuff. You can also make your own elderberry syrup at home. You can get the concentrate and just make the syrup.
Yeah.
But
Oh, I like it.
I tell people to, take elderberry regularly if they feel like they're getting a lot of sniffles and a lot of colds and things like that. And it usually does help. I mean, I try to go preventatively. I try to really keep my nutrition dialed in, but I've been crazy busy with work lately, and I haven't had time to do as much food prep as I want. So my nutrition isn't as great as it normally is. So I'm taking my supplements. I'm taking my elderberry and my vitamin D and my vitamin C and my zinc, because I want to make sure that I'm sort of giving myself a little bit of padding there, so that if I'm missing the
Yeah.
boat on my overall nutrition, then I'm still getting some of these essentials. So
Such a
yeah,
balance, isn't it? I mean, you're talking
it
about all
really is.
the supplements and everything, but then your sleep is probably declining, and your stress is going up, and the cortisol, and it's just all of the things that can affect your immune system and therefore your overall health and your training. And it's such a balance.
Some of those mushrooms will actually help with sleep too, and they're not hallucinogenic mushrooms. So but like
Oh,
there's
I'm gonna
actually there's
try
one.
that. I love
Yeah,
it. I'm gonna try that.
yeah. There's
I drink too
reishi is the
much
big
coffee.
one.
I think
Reishi
I
is the
drink
big
too
one for
much.
immune support.
I drink too much coffee, I'm sure. And so if I switched to one of these mushroom drinks that you said, would
Hmm.
that be beneficial, you think? Is that
I mean,
are they
I think it would.
caffeine or
I'll be honest with you. I haven't tried them because I only drink one cup of coffee a day. I love it, and it's my
oh, you're
favorite
so
thing
good.
ever. And I have that
Yeah.
one cup in the morning, but because I'm very high energy anyway, and I can't imagine myself buzzed on caffeine all day any more than I already am.
Right.
But yeah, I think that the mushroom coffee could be beneficial for you to cut back on your caffeine. The other thing to consider is matcha, green tea.
Yeah.
Matcha in particular tends to have immune boosting effects and healing properties, and can give you sort of a more very gentle energy boost, as opposed to that like spike that you get from the caffeine in coffee.
I
So
think we
I
have
usually drink
matcha
it.
too.
Yeah, and it's high in vitamin C. I mean, it actually like, so I drink a cup of matcha every day, because the caffeine does not hit you the way caffeine in coffee does. So, that's another thing. I mean, it's nice to have a warm cup of tea in the winter anyway. So there you go.
I think I'm healthy. I think I'm doing well and everything, but oh man, I've got 19 things to try now that I'm talking to you.
Well, you don't have to try them all at once. We do one at a
I know.
time. I mean, that's the other
I
thing.
know.
And this
Yes.
is like when I have people on elimination diets and they want to cut everything out. And I'm like, yeah, okay, cut everything out. But then we have to add one thing back in at a time so we can see what you were
Yes.
reacting to in the first place. So yeah,
So we don't need to take notes and change everything here, but take what you're saying
nope.
overall and think and make
Yes.
good choices as you go along. You don't have to do it.
Yes. Yes.
Um, You touched on I forget why now. I forget the transition, but I wanted you to talk about women specific
Yes.
diets and their needs
Okay.
as you go through your cycle, and
Uh-huh.
please,
Uh-huh.
what what should be done throughout the cycle,
Okay.
or looked
So
at or
first
thought
things
about.
first, as I had mentioned earlier, and this is more important for women than it is for men, minimum of 20% of your calories from fat across the board. I don't care
Okay.
who you are. For athletes, it should probably be even higher because you're burning more.
Yeah.
But women in particular, because we have a different hormone balance, our bodies do require that fat in order to make the hormones that we need for our cycles to be regulated and for our bodies to function properly. So we do need to make sure that women are getting at least, especially female athletes, at least 20 to 25% of their calories from fat. I don't want people doing 80% and keto and all that. Just 20 to 25 and you're good. So you can go over if
Okay.
you want to. I just don't want anybody going under that. So that's usually my recommendation. Iron obviously is extremely important for women, especially during their reproductive years, because we lose a lot during your menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
So it's very important for women to get iron. And iron is really hard to absorb if you're not eating meat, because you have heme iron and non-heme iron. And heme is the meat-based form, and non-heme is not from meat, it's from plants and seeds. And that's much harder for your body to actually digest and convert, which is why we actually see a lot of vegetarians and vegans who are low in iron. So iron is one of the things that I will recommend to people to supplement, especially if they're not eating a lot of meat. The problem becomes those supplements can be kind of hard on the digestive system. So I usually tell people to look for a food-based one. And there's a couple of good brands out there. There's one called oh gosh, now I can't remember. Mega Red, I think. And it's a really good iron supplement that won't upset your stomach too much. But yeah, iron is very important for women, and obviously for
Awesome.
athletes in general, because we want to make sure that we are, getting optimal oxygen shuttle to our red blood cells so that we can function properly and exercise well. So that's really important. Speaking of hormones, omega-3 fatty acids in particular, when we're talking about fats, the American diet historically has been very heavy on the inflammatory omega-6 side. We want to shift people over more towards omega-3s. So you're talking more about cold water fatty fish and the fish oils. Flax seeds are okay. Walnuts are okay. What I don't like to see is when people are eating a lot of the seed oils like canola and soybean and all. I don't use any of those in my life. I do not consume them. They're inflammatory and they're not good for your body. But that's what a lot of packaged foods, a lot of restaurants, that's what they use because they're cheap and easy to mass produce.
Yeah.
They're just kind of killing us slowly. So, I mean, when I recommend fats to people, I say to them, eat avocados, cook with avocado oil, use extra virgin olive oil only if you're doing low heat or using it for salad dressings,
Oh,
and,
smart.
grass fed butter or ghee, and coconut oil. So, the rest of them, like, I don't want to see anybody using the canola and the soybean and the vegetable oil mix and, the safflower and sunflower oil. Like, these are all, you know, half rancid already because of free radical damage when you heat them.
Oh,
So, yeah.
yeah.
So, those are important for women. Calcium, obviously, for bone health.
Yeah.
Women are more prone to osteoporosis, especially as we age. You and I had talked about this actually on our last talk because we were talking about the importance of strength training and weight bearing exercise.
Yeah.
But it's important that you have that calcium in your system in order to build those bones. So it's super important for female athletes in particular to be getting enough calcium and vitamin D, since they work in concert. So, B6 can also help prevent anemia if you're low in iron. So I tell people a lot of the time too, make sure you're getting enough B6 and B vitamins in general. And another supplement that's okay to take, if you take a B vitamin complex,
Yeah.
that can actually be really useful. It's great for energy, and overall performance. And it will also ensure that you're getting enough of these vitamins if you're not eating the foods that
So
are rich in them.
vitamin D supplement and a vitamin B complex.
Vitamin B complex if you feel like you're not getting enough like B6 and B12, because the B6 is good for preventing anemia. The B12 is really good for your nervous system and energy production. So it's easier to just take a B complex that has all of them as opposed
Yeah.
to having to pick out the individual ones. And
Yes.
B12 is really important, and vegans and vegetarians don't usually get enough of it because it's usually only present in animal foods. So if we'll always tell vegans you have to take a B12 supplement because you're not getting it from anything else.
Right.
So, yeah. And then, magnesium is important. Zinc is important for athletes. We want to make sure that we're supporting the immune system with all of the hard work that we're putting it through. So the zinc is important again. And then the magnesium, that goes hand in hand with your electrolytes, your magnesium, your potassium, your sodium, making sure that you're keeping those levels in check. It's, especially if you're like me, I'm like Matt Wilpers. I wake up sweating in the morning. So when I'm on the bike, I've got Lake Wilpers or the Sea of Wilpers underneath my bike by the time I'm done. So
That's funny.
I do like to make sure that I am drinking electrolytes while I'm working out, and I carry a bottle of water with me all day long. But it's not enough to just drink water. You have to replenish what you're sweating out, and you're sweating out more than just water. So and for women, I think also, I think women also need to focus on getting more fiber, because obviously it's very important for their gut health. And it also helps, decrease inflammation because you're supporting your immune system. So I think overall, yes, men and women both need fiber, but considering the fact that women have their own unique nutritional needs just based on our hormones and our cycles and all that, I think it's even more important sometimes for us to dial in and make sure that we're getting enough of these things.
What about the timing of the cycle? So you have your period and then you switch phases a couple weeks later. And should you be focused on protein at more of one time or
not really
more at one time or no?
Not really. I think for that, if we wanted to get really granular about it, we could probably pull up some research studies that would show like mild tweaks could make somewhat of a difference. But at the end of the day, your body's going to sort of be working on a rolling basis where it's constantly turning over and using what you're giving it. So I don't think that any specific hard stops and starts in terms of changing quantities during different points in your cycle make that much of a difference. I've noticed for myself, I'm in menopause now, so it's a different story, but I had noticed for myself that I was much stronger the first couple days of my cycle than I was any other time of the month. And that's true for a lot of women. So at that point, I would say, plan to take your FTP test, do something that's really super hardcore, and then make sure that you're supporting your nutrition for that accordingly, which would probably mean taking extra care to make sure that you're getting enough of your carbs and enough of the protein to replenish and all of these things. But as you go through your cycle, some women will feel like they're having a different, responding differently to different foods. And sometimes when you're at the height of your cycle, yes, it can help to get a little bit of extra calcium. It can help to get a little bit of extra protein. But my concern when I start to make these recommendations is it sort of becomes an obsession. And they're like, oh God, I'm on day 3 of my cycle. And now I have to make sure that I have this. I'm like,
no, you have to go work out. Day 1 and day 2, you have to go work out. Yes.
Honestly, you should be working out every day of your cycle because it will help you feel better, but that doesn't mean it has to be hardcore. There are days where, I've had clients say to me, oh, when I'm halfway through my cycle, I'm so tired, I can barely get out of bed. And I say to them, okay, you know what? Go for a walk in the fresh air for 10 minutes just to get your blood flowing, or go do some yoga just to flow on your mat. Do something to move and you will feel better. You do an active recovery. It doesn't have to be hardcore, but on the days when you're feeling like Wonder Woman, like I usually would for the first couple of days, that was when I was like, okay, I'm going to tackle this, PZ Max or this Hidden Hills ride or whatever that day because I knew that I was going to be able to get through it. So yeah.
Oh, I have women who mark their cycle on the Training Peaks calendar, and we look at it like we look 6 months ahead. Where are you going to be on event day, and plan for it and make a plan for it. And sometimes it lands on we've collectively called it Superwoman Day or Wonder Woman Day, but totally. So that's really cool. So, such good information. Oh my gosh. I don't know. I'm going to have to replay this over and over again, but not make all the changes at once and just take what
and I'm happy to send you notes too. You don't have to just keep watching the video. So, I can also send you some stuff.
Actually, that's a good point. I can actually easily make a transcript of this and we could do it that way, or your notes if you want to post when I post this, so we can make sure that people get all the information they want. But I think the overall knowledge is here, but make changes slowly and don't feel overwhelmed. Yes.
Yes. And look, we're human, we're fallible humans and people make mistakes, and we're not, I do this for a living and I'm not perfect. My favorite food on the planet is potato chips. I eat potato chips pretty much every day. It's okay because the rest of the food that I eat is actually really
Yeah.
well balanced and very
Yeah.
nourishing. But it doesn't mean that you can't have those snacks and you can't, have those enjoyable things. But especially when we are at the height of germ season and everybody around me is hacking and sneezing and has all of these things going on, I am making sure to protect myself by taking the things we talked about and making sure that I'm eating very well balanced meals that have a lot of antioxidants and cover the spectrum of the rainbow in color. I think that's really our best defense.
Oh, so good, so good. All right, the whole team is going to be more healthy now because of you. Thank
Yay!
you, Marjorie. This
It
is
was my pleasure.
awesome. Yeah. Oh, what fun. So, everybody give Marjorie some love in the comments on Facebook, and we
Peace,
will
team.
see you later.
Yes, see you all soon.